to live in the world, it'd be very easy to stay on track. Very easy. I come up with 4 different types of distraction for not keeping our eye on God. First one I come up with was relationships. Relationships are good. Most of us have been married. We got kids. You work with people, siblings, co-workers, bosses. All that stuff's okay in moderation. You can't become so focused on trying to find a wife, take care of your children, that you push God aside and you forget the importance of following God. Because God calls us to be, to love one another, and you have to have relationships to do that, obviously, but you can't forget God in the process. And the most dangerous one is when you're looking for a spouse, or you have a boyfriend or girlfriend, and we're starting to deal with that with my children as they get older and find boyfriends, which is tough on Dad, but he's doing pretty good. They got pretty good boyfriends. But I try to explain to them, don't forget and don't compromise what you believe. Because more than likely, that'll put a strain on your marriage. If you want to go to church and your husband don't, or vice versa, you need to be looking, and I've told this to them from the beginning, you need to look for somebody, when you start dating, does this person create the traits that I could someday be married to? And I told them, if not, then you don't need to be dating that person. Second one is work. Now, coming from the Hughes family, work is not a problem. They work day and night no matter what. They always have. Everybody needs to work to have money. But a lot of people think when I say work, you're thinking like a job. But we served as children's pastors in Ottumwa at First Penn on Church Street for 7 years. And being in the ministry, it can become a big distraction too. Yes, you're doing God's work, but you become so focused on making sure that Vacation Bible School happens, to make sure that all your Sunday school teachers are in place and everything else, that you yourself forget to stay focused on God. Because we had roughly 60 kids every Sunday, so that creates a lot of Sunday school teachers. And just like in the workplace, not everybody calls and says, hey, I'm not coming in today, I'm sick. They just don't show up. And and then it's left to us juggling everything around. So then you get very busy in what you're doing. So we need to remember to listen to Jesus and be flexible. Because a lot of times as we get older, and I'm starting to be in that category, we get very set. And this is how it has to be. We have to do this, we have to do this, we have to do this. That is not the way that has to be. Because as we get older, we also have to be flexible enough to change how we do things, so the younger generation will also, we can bring them into what we're doing. And we found that with, we're still on the younger end of that, but if you don't allow your church to change, and I don't mean compromise what you believe, but you have to be able to reach the younger generation, and you can't do that with what they did in 1920, or 1960, or 1970. Because you're going to, and nothing against the older congregation, but as they get older, we have to bring in my kids, and your grandkids, and so on. So, the third one is hobbies. A lot of us have hobbies. My hobby's probably working, farming, I suppose, would be my hobby. I don't really know what kids. But some of us, when we're not working, you spend so much time doing that. Well, I don't have time to go to church today, I'm going to go golfing. And every time you don't go on a Sunday, it's much easier to stay home the next Sunday. And so we want to make sure we make time for God. The fourth one, and then I'm going to read a little bit about out of the Bible more on what I'm explaining, but the biggest one I see in today's generation would be technology. Now, technology, we obviously have to have it, And we need to use it to draw younger people in my opinion. But we can't overdo it. And we have the same thing at our house. You look around, everybody's on their phone, watching TV, and they're not doing, maybe looking at Facebook. I get on Craigslist quite a bit. I don't know why, because I don't need to buy anything, but I just like to see people out for sale. So sometimes we need to just put our phone down, quit texting, not be on our iPads, don't check your email, nothing. We just need to take time and spend time with God. And instead of working God into our schedules, we really should be working our schedule around God. And like I said, I've been raised in church my whole life, so it's a little easier. But even us, we get busy, and 3 days went by and you haven't read the Bible. A week's went by and you haven't read the Bible. And then same way, that gets easier and easier, and then God is pushed on the back burner. And when we keep pushing God on the back burner, that allows other things to creep into our life that we're not planning on. And in Matthew, chapter 14, verse 22, it talks through 36. It talks about Jesus walking on water. Immediately after, Jesus insisted that his disciples get back into the boat and cross to the other side of the lake. While he sent the people home, after sending them home, he went up into the hills by himself to pray. Night fell while he was there alone. Meanwhile, the disciples were in trouble far away from land, for a strong wind had risen, and they were fighting heavy waves. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them, walking on the water. When the disciples saw him walking on water, they were terrified. In fear, they cried out, "It's a ghost." But Jesus spoke to them. "Don't be afraid," he said. "Take courage, I am here." Then Peter called out to him, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on water." Now, Jesus didn't volunteer that. Peter said, "If it's really you, tell me to do this." So, God did. Or Jesus did. Then Peter called to him, So Peter went over to the side of the boat and walked on the water toward Jesus. But when he saw the strong wind and waves, he was terrified and began to sink. "Save me, Lord," he shouted. Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. "You have so little faith," Jesus said. "Why do you doubt me?" When they climbed back into the boat, the wind stopped. The disciples whispered, "You really are the Son of God," they exclaimed. After they crossed the lake, they went to the land of... I'm not even sure how to say that. But when the people recognized Jesus, the news of his arrival spread quickly throughout the whole area, and soon people were bringing all their sick to be healed. They begged him to let the sick touch at least the fringe of his robe, and all who touched him were healed. Now, a lot of times in life, when we call out to Jesus, we want Jesus to show us he's there, and then when we get scared and things get hard, a lot of people just want to stop. They don't want to follow through, and if just like in this case, Jesus is there whenever we ask. We just have to keep our eyes on what's going on. The other, in Luke chapter 8, the parable of the farmer scattering the seed. Now, how many of you plant a garden? Very many? How many of you keep up on your garden? Not as many. We plant a big garden. It's way bigger than the sanctuary, probably at least 2 times this size. That doesn't just happen. That takes a lot of time. I have a lot of hands that help, but we planted over 50 tomato plants last year. I don't know how many, everything else. We had a lot. But if you miss a couple weeks, what happens? Weeds are everywhere, and then it takes forever to get back. So I try very hard on almost a nightly basis. You're pulling weeds or doing something. But what happens in our Christian life is we get busy, a week goes by, 2 weeks go by, you maybe miss church, maybe you're not reading the Bible, maybe you're hanging out with her, talking to people you hadn't ought to be, then weeds start creeping in. Little things like that, and then pretty soon, you think, well, I shouldn't be doing that. But then another week goes by, and then it doesn't seem to be as big a deal as it was the week before. So pretty soon, it's like your garden, you just don't worry about it. I ain't been in church for a month, it's okay. I can be saved at home. I hear that all the time. I don't have to go to church to be saved. No, you don't. But it does help. Just like working on your garden every day. Yeah, you can have a garden at the end of the year if you plant it and leave it. But what's it going to look like? You're not going to be able to tell the difference. So, in your Christian life, a lot of people, they get saved, and they start off good, and then they slowly fizzle out. And in our experience at First Penn, where they had they called it, I can't think of the name of it now, Thursday night group. Once lost, now found. A lot of prison, or not, people got out of jail, they come there, and you would see that. We saw it for years. Man, they come in, they're on fire, ready to go. About 6 months, they start dwindling down, and pretty soon, they just like the seed that gets thrown on the rock. It sprouts, they're ready to go, and then they don't keep up with it, and then it just kind of fizzles out. So that's what we just need to keep our eyes on Jesus all the time. And in today's society, that is very, very hard. Because, like the church we're at now, you're constantly competing with baseball, basketball, all the traveling teams. Our kids have done that before. They did it for one summer. I was glad when they wanted to quit because it's hard. But all those games are on Sunday. So then you are faced with, as a church or as a body, we're doing the same thing down there. What do you do to get people in here? Well, how do you compete with all that? Because the parents want their kids to be good at sports because someday they might go to college and get a scholarship. That's good. But at the same time, if you lose your children, because your eyes aren't faced on, or aren't turned towards God, what good college scholarship and stuff if your kids aren't where they need to be? Now, I realize that parents can't make their kids stay in church and do what they live like they're supposed to, but they live by example. And if we as parents are not, and grandparents and great-grandparents are not doing that, then that falls back on our shoulders a little bit. One of the guys that worked for me, like I said, they're kind of hit and miss. They go to church here and there. And he's a pretty good guy, but he does a lot of stuff that he should not do. And he says, I asked him, what about your kids? Well, they won't do that stuff. I tell them not to do it. I said, but it don't work like that. If you don't want your kids to do this, you better not be doing the same thing. If you don't want them to be, and I'm not saying anything about drinking, but that's one of his things. Well, they won't do that, but you're doing that in front of them. So if you don't want them to do that, then you shouldn't be doing that. And if you want them to go to church, I tell them, you're the leader in your home. Well, my wife didn't want to go today. Go without her. And he started doing that the last couple of weeks, and he goes, that's working. She goes too. I said, yes, she will follow you. So if we keep our eyes on Jesus, things in life will seem a lot easier also. A lot of times things get tough. We get mad at God because He caused this or He did this. But everything has a reason. Sometimes it's a little hard. We don't like to take that. But guy at work, his daughter got killed about 11 years ago. She was 20 years old. And he still to this day has a very hard time with that. And he said, Nick, I don't understand it. I just get mad at God every day. And he goes to Open Bible, and he's a board member and stuff. He said, but I just get mad. All these guys are doing all this stuff. I said, but the difference is your daughter was saved. So maybe that's why God hasn't took somebody else, because they needed to get that way. He goes, I know it, but it doesn't make it easier. So anyway, we just need to keep our eyes focused on God, and the rest